I still remember the summer evening when I first met him. It was one of those golden evenings when the air feels thick with promises, when the heat of the day begins to dissolve into the soft hum of twilight. I was 20 years old, young, naive, and full of hope. He was 23, tall and broad-shouldered, with an easy smile that could melt through the sharpest of defenses. He wasn't the most handsome man in the world, but he had presence, a charisma that drew people toward him. Back then, I didn't have much. I was fresh out of college, still unsure of what I wanted from life. He walked into my world like a gust of wind, blowing away all hesitation, all doubt. He made me feel like I mattered, like my existence had suddenly become brighter just because he was looking at me. We fell in love fast. Too fast, perhaps, but when you're young, you don't measure love with caution or logic. You measure it with heartbeats and laughter. We would spend hours talking about nothing, childhood memories, silly dreams, places we wanted to see. He would tell me about his ambition, how he wanted to build something of his own, how he would give me a life where I'd never have to worry. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Our wedding was small, nothing grand or extravagant, but to me it felt magical. I wore a simple white dress. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit his broad frame. I remember the way he looked at me when I walked down the aisle, like I was the only person in the universe. My mother whispered in my ear that day, "Don't lose that look, darling. That's rare." The first years were beautiful. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. Our first apartment was tiny, barely big enough for the two of us, with thin walls that carried every sound. But we made it home. We painted the walls ourselves, filled the shelves with second-hand books, cooked together on weekends. I can still smell the burnt pancakes from our first attempt at a romantic breakfast. And then came our children, our daughter first, then our son 2 years later, holding them for the first time. There are no words. It was as if life had given me proof that love could create miracles. Nights were sleepless, days were exhausting, but I never minded. He would come home tired from work, and I would hand him our daughter, laughing as she pulled at his hair. Those were the days when family meant everything. Looking back, I realize now that happiness was fragile even then. But in those early years, I didn't see the cracks forming. All I saw was the man I loved, our children, and the promise of forever. It didn't happen overnight. The change was slow, creeping, almost invisible. If love is a glass window, then ours began to collect tiny cracks long before it shattered. He got busier with work. At first, I told myself it was normal. He was providing for us, building the life he had always promised. But the late nights started piling up. He would come home after midnight, the smell of alcohol faint on his breath, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He told me it was just business dinners, meetings, clients. And I believed him, because I wanted to. I remember the first time I felt truly alone in our marriage. It was our 7th anniversary. I had spent the entire day preparing, cooking his favorite meal, dressing up, even buying a small gift with what little money I had saved. I waited for him with candles lit on the table, our children already asleep. But he never came home. My calls went unanswered. Around 2 a.m. he stumbled in, too drunk to notice the cold dinner, the burnt-out candles, or the tears that had dried on my cheeks hours before. I told myself not to be bitter. He was tired, overworked, under pressure. I whispered excuses for him into the darkness, convincing myself that love meant patience. But the fights began. Small at first, about money, about the children, about how little time he spent with us, then bigger. He grew short-tempered, irritable. Sometimes I would see him staring at me with an expression I couldn't read, as if I was a stranger sitting in his kitchen. I tried to fix things. I tried to dress nicer, to laugh more, to plan weekends away. But the more I tried, the more distant he became. There were moments when I felt I was holding on to a ghost, a man who was present in body but gone in spirit. And yet he could still be charming. When he wanted to, he would smile, kiss me softly, and remind me of the man I had fallen in love with. Those moments were rare, but they kept me tied to him. I kept telling myself he was still in there somewhere, that the man who had once looked at me with eyes full of love hadn't completely disappeared. I see now that I was lying to myself. Love had become a habit, a routine. I wasn't in love with him anymore. I was in love with the memory of who he used to be. Silence has a way of suffocating a marriage. It wasn't the loud fights that destroyed me, it was the quiet. The dinners where we barely spoke. The nights where he turned his back to me in bed. The mornings where he left without even saying goodbye. I tried to fill the silence. I threw myself into raising the children, into keeping the house spotless, into being the perfect wife. But perfection doesn't matter when love has faded. There were days when I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the clock, waiting for him to come home. My chest would tighten with hope every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, only to collapse into despair when they passed our door. The loneliness was unbearable. Sometimes I would cry quietly in the bathroom, running the water so the children wouldn't hear. I didn't want them to know that their mother was breaking. I wanted them to believe in love, to believe in family. But children are perceptive. One evening, my daughter, only 12 at the time, asked me, "Mum, why don't you smile anymore?" And I had no answer. The truth was, I didn't recognize myself. The girl who once believed in love had been replaced by a woman who was holding everything together with trembling hands. I felt invisible, unwanted, forgotten. I began to suspect things, though I didn't dare say them out loud. The late nights, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine, the way his phone was suddenly always on silent, face down on the table. My gut screamed the truth, but my heart refused to accept it. So I stayed silent. I carried the weight of it all, day after day, smile after forced smile, until silence became my second skin. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind of evening where nothing seems unusual. I had just put our son to bed, kissed his forehead, and tiptoed out of the room. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. He wasn't home yet, though it was already close to midnight. I sat on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone, when I noticed his jacket draped over the chair. He had left it there the night before. Something about it caught my attention, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Sweet, floral, not the brand I wore. My stomach tightened, but I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, fatigue, paranoia. That's what I called it as I pushed the jacket aside. But the seed of doubt had been planted. A few days later, I found his phone on the nightstand. Normally I wouldn't snoop. I had always respected his privacy. But this time something inside me broke. My hands shook as I picked it up, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. The screen lit up with a message, a name I didn't recognize. The words were simple, innocent even. "I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect." The world spun around me, my knees gave out, and I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the glowing words that had shattered my world. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't stress, it was betrayal. When he came home later that night, I didn't confront him. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing, my chest heavy with unspoken words. I lay next to him in bed, staring at the ceiling, while he drifted into sleep without a care in the world. That night, I realized the man I had loved for more than a decade was no longer mine. The days after the discovery were a blur. I moved through life like a ghost, performing my duties as a mother, smiling when I had to, cooking meals, folding laundry. But inside, I was hollow. Every time he touched his phone, I felt a wave of nausea. Every time he smiled at a message, I wanted to scream. But I stayed silent. Not because I was afraid of the truth, I already knew the truth. I stayed silent because I didn't know what to do with it. Should I leave? Should I confront him? Should I protect the children from the storm that would surely come if I spoke up? I began to notice the little lies, the late meetings that stretched until morning, the receipts in his pockets from restaurants we had never visited together, the way he avoided my gaze when I asked him simple questions. One night, he came home drunk. I helped him out of his shoes, guided him to bed, and as he drifted into unconsciousness, he whispered another woman's name, not mine. That was the moment my illusions shattered completely. I realized I was living with a stranger who shared my bed, my table, my life, but not my heart. And yet I didn't leave, because of the children, because of the years we had built together, because love, even when poisoned, has a way of chaining you to the past. The anger came slowly, creeping into my veins like fire. At first it was quiet, a simmering resentment that I kept hidden behind polite smiles and gentle nods. But as the days passed, it grew louder, fiercer, impossible to ignore. I would stand in front of the mirror, staring at the woman who looked back at me, and wonder where she had gone. The girl who once believed in fairy tales, who once thought love could conquer anything. She was gone. In her place stood a woman scarred by betrayal, a woman drowning in silence. I wanted to scream at him, to throw the phone at his face and demand answers, to ask him why. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he need someone else? Why did he destroy everything we had built? But every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat. Because deep down, I already knew the answers. It wasn't about me, it was about him, his choices, his weakness, his selfishness. So I carried the storm inside me, waiting for the day it would explode. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The night it all came crashing down wasn't planned. It wasn't a dramatic moment with candles, shouting, or carefully chosen words. It was messy, raw, human. I had just finished washing the dishes, the warm water stinging my hands. He walked in, smelling faintly of alcohol and smoke, his eyes glazed. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't hold the silence anymore. "Who is she?" I asked quietly. He froze. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. Then he laughed, a hollow, nervous laugh. "You're imagining things." "No, I'm not." My voice trembled, but I stood firm. "I saw the messages, I know, all right? I know." The laughter died in his throat. His expression shifted, shock, then anger, then something like guilt. He ran his hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. "It's not what you think," he muttered. I slammed the plate I was holding onto the counter, the sound shattering the tension like glass. "Don't you dare insult me with lies. You've been seeing her, haven't you? For how long? How long have you been betraying me?" Silence. That silence was louder than any confession. I felt my knees weaken. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I gave you everything, my love, my trust, my loyalty, and this is how you repay me." He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, "It was a mistake, as if a year of secret meetings, whispered phone calls, and lies could be reduced to a single word." That night, I realized there was nothing left to salvage. After the confrontation, life became unbearable. He slept on the couch for a while, though sometimes he didn't come home at all. I avoided his eyes, his touch, his presence. The house felt like a battlefield, littered with invisible mines waiting to explode. And I began to fall apart. Nights became my enemy. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every lie, every late night, every smile he gave her instead of me. I drank to numb the pain, glass after glass, until the world blurred and I could finally close my eyes. Days blurred into nights. I stopped eating, stopped caring. My reflection in the mirror became unrecognizable, pale skin, hollow eyes, lips cracked from too much wine and too little rest. There were moments when the pain was too much, when the thought of ending it all whispered in my ear. One night, I stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights below, wondering if anyone would even miss me. But then, I thought of my son, his smile, his laugh, the way he ran to me when he was scared. And I knew I couldn't leave him. He didn't deserve to suffer because of his father's betrayal, so I chose to live. Not for myself, but for him. Always for him. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's not a word spoken once and done. It's 1,000 tiny decisions you make every day, to stay, to endure, to keep the mask in place. I didn't forgive him because he deserved it. I forgave him because my son deserved a childhood that wasn't shattered by divorce, anger and resentment. I forgave him because children see more than we realize, and I couldn't let my bitterness poison him. So I smiled when I wanted to scream. I laughed when I wanted to cry. I kissed my husband on the cheek when our son was watching, even though the touch made my skin crawl. People often say forgiveness sets you free, but that's a lie. Forgiveness chained me to a life I didn't want. It forced me to bury my pain so deep that sometimes I wondered if I was still alive inside. But I did it anyway, for my son, always for him. Years have passed since then. My son has grown, happy and healthy. To him, we are the perfect family. He doesn't know the truth. He doesn't see the cracks in the foundation, the secrets we bury, the ghosts that haunt me. My husband and I still live together. On the surface, we are fine. Dinners, family trips, polite conversations. But beneath it all lies a silence heavier than stone. Sometimes, late at night, I watch him sleep and wonder if he ever regrets what he did. If he ever thinks about the woman he betrayed. If he ever sees the mask I wear and realizes it's not my real face. Because that's what my life has become, a mask. A smile painted over scars, laughter hiding tears, forgiveness masking betrayal. I carry it well, so well that sometimes even I start to believe it. But deep inside, I know the truth. I will never forget. I will never truly heal. And that is the price I chose to pay. For my son, for his future, for the illusion of a happy family. The mask remains. And behind it, I am still waiting for the day I can finally breathe again.